and welcome to the Movies Past and Present podcast. It's February 15th, 2021. This is episode 63. I'm your host, Stanford Clark, and I'm podcasting from the crossroads of the West in beautiful Salt Lake City, Utah. Just like my blog, moviespastandpresent.com, I'll be providing recommendations, commentary, and reviews about current and classic cinema. Thanks for tuning in, and let's do this thing. New in theaters this week is Judas and the Black Messiah. This is a drama from Warner Brothers, and it is a really interesting film. I watched it on HBO Max because it's a Warner Brothers movie. You know, it's both, these films are getting released both in movie theaters and, were available and on HBO Max the same day. So this film is a historical drama based on true events and actual people. It's set in 1968, and it's about the Black Panther Party, and specifically about Fred Hampton, who was their youthful and very charismatic leader. He was only 21 at the time that all this stuff went down, and it's really the story of two guys. It's about Fred Hampton, and then about one of his colleagues in the Black Panther Party named William O'Neill, who actually was an undercover agent for the FBI. He was William O'Neill was facing a prison sentence, and he was offered a deal by the FBI to infiltrate the Black Panthers and then provide the intel on them. And so he chose to take the deal rather than going to prison. So you get a really interesting look clearly about the relationship between these two men and other people in their lives as well that are involved with the Black Panther Party. But a really interesting look into the young life of Fred Hampton. The press materials are interesting. They talk about Fred Hampton's impact that continues to reverberate. I'm just going to quote it here. The government saw the Black Panthers as a militant threat to the status quo and sold the lie to a frightened public in a time of growing civil unrest. But the perception of the Panthers was not reality. In inner cities across America, they were providing free breakfast for children, legal services, medical clinics, and research into sickle cell anemia and political education. And it was, quote-unquote, Chairman Fred in Chicago who, recognizing the power of multicultural unity for a common cause, created the Rainbow Coalition, joining forces with other oppressed peoples in the city to fight for equality and political empowerment, end quote. This film is directed by Shaka King. And if you've never heard of Shaka King, neither had I. It's because he's making his studio feature film directorial debut with this film. Fred Hampton is played by Daniel Kaluuya, and then William O'Neill, who's the undercover agent, is played by Lakeith Stanfield. And they're very good. The supporting cast is good. Martin Sheen shows up. He plays J. Edgar Hoover, and he's chilling in it, actually. Kind of nightmare the way that he's made up and the way they filmed him. But I thought Judas and the Black Messiah was an excellent film. It's rated R by the Motion Picture Association for violence and pervasive language. Again, not a surprise there considering the subject matter, but Judas and the Black Messiah was definitely a thought-provoking and interesting movie going or movie watching experience, I guess, for me, since I watched it on my couch. In theaters too, again, as I say every time, check your local listings for comeback classics. Some of the comeback classics over the last week or so have been The Notebook. For Valentine's Day, I read that Hidden Figures, that really great film about the black women that worked for NASA during the space race, that's playing in theaters. And anyway, so yeah, check your local listings and take advantage of any of these comeback classics that you might enjoy, again, if you're willing to mask up and go to the theater. So as I mentioned probably a couple episodes ago, one of my movie watching projects this year is to watch all 50 films that are listed in a really cool viewing guide that's been created by Turner Classic Movies. It's called Must See Musicals, and so there are 50 musicals that are included in this book. So I'm just trying to watch one a week. The films are listed in chronological order, so in a way it's a bit of a film history class. And these are really, for me, they're fun things to do. So I'm going to share with you some of the things that I've learned so far, and maybe make a recommendation or two. So these films that are in the guide, these first few films, of course, they're very old films. They're the first really talking motion pictures that were made when sound became a deal in Hollywood. And so the first one on the list was from 1929. And these films that they picked they put in the guide have all been from 1929 to 1933. So 4 years of films. One thing to mention about this time period, as you probably know, so thanks for indulging me here, but it's an area it's a time period that's often referred to as a pre-code. And so it was, basically like a 4-year period in the American film industry, when, starting with the adoption of sound in films, which was, 1929, into the enforcement of what was known as the Motion Picture Production Code, which was implemented in 1934. This Motion Picture Production Code was basically, for lack of a better word, censorship guidelines, or maybe a better way to say it could be decency guidelines. It was also referred to as the Hays Code, which referring to a man by the name of Will Hays, who was recruited by the studios to help them clean up this this kind of scandalous approach that they were taking to films. So all these musicals that have been on the list so far have been pre-code musicals. And so just to kind of give you a description, these pre-code films, whether they were musicals or not, because there were plenty of dramas and comedies too, but they depicted or implied a lot of sexual innuendo, interracial relationships, which is, again, scandalous for the time. Mild profanity, it hasn't been a lot, but, there's some. Illegal drug use, yes. Promiscuity, yes, definitely plenty of that. Prostitution, infidelity, abortion, intense violence, some homosexuality, and really a really interesting element about these pre-code films too is that, like, the bad characters, okay, so like the villains and the characters that are up to no good, often are seen to profit from their deeds without really any kind of repercussions. And so, that's an interesting thing to see. This wasn't as much in these musicals. It's really prevalent in like gangster films and whatnot. Also, these films highlight really strong female characters, and again, and they examine a lot of interesting female subject matters in these films that really don't get revisited until decades later. In other U.S. films, kind of like 50s, 60s, and beyond. But these pre-code films are really something. Turner Classic Movies does a really good job just on their network. If you're ever watching it and you see these films that are dated between 1929 and 1934, if you ever want to check them out, kind of that it might be worth your time. But specifically back to the task of these musicals, the ones that they picked were overall, again, interesting. I felt like it was, a bit of this was the film school moment. So maybe not as entertaining as you might think a musical would be, but still interesting to see the evolution. The very first film they recommended, in the guide was one called The Broadway Melody. It's made by MGM in 1929. Now, of course, we know MGM becomes the powerhouse in musicals, and there's going to be a lot of those coming up in the year of in these 50 films listed in the guide. But it kind of starts with the whimper. This Broadway Melody movie is actually a pretty dreadful film. But I like what the book's author, his name is Richard Barrios, and he's a terrific writer in this film guide. He's saying that really, though, this requires perspective. Difficult as it may be, try to imagine how all of this looked. So meaning, the singing and dancing and stuff going on the screen in these early musicals. How it looked to an audience who had never before seen a musical. This is where and how musicals got their start. So I've tried to keep that in mind, even though some of these have been a bit of a struggle. Probably my favorite of these films. I'll put a link in the podcast notes of my blog. You can see this list of films. I've been watching one a week. So you can kind of see the count there. But there was one from 1929 called The Love Parade. It's probably the only one that I would really recommend of these ones that I've watched. With the exception that we'll get to this other one in just a sec. But this film was the feature film debut of Jeanette MacDonald, who became a big musical star of the era, and Marie Chevalier, who's from France. These two are so charming in this movie. It's a great battle of the sexes, of course, loaded with pre-code stuff, pre-code innuendo and whatnot that you kind of can't believe. But it's the one film of these pre-code musicals that really stood out to me. Um, it um, just again to quote, uh, it was, it's an elegant film. It's a body film, as in Bawdy, made before the production code. But just to see Maurice Chevalier and Jeanette MacDonald, and then they just benefit so much from the director. The director is Ernst Lubitsch, and he was a great silent film director who was able to transition into sound films. And he's got a thing they refer to as the Lubitsch touch, and it's this really elusive style of comedy that is just so. Again, it's just, elegant is a good word for it. It's light on its feet. It doesn't just hit you over the head. Again, you can't believe they get away with some of this innuendo that they've got in their dialogue and in these songs. But it's also so fun to see, again, just Jeanette MacDonald and Maurice Chevalier early on in their careers, the great chemistry that they have, and just the great talent they have. Jeanette MacDonald doesn't necessarily have my favorite singing voice, but when you see her, you can kind of forgive it and lose yourself in the performance and just in just the fun and delight of the film. So the trick, though, is, and again, I'm kind of hesitant to even recommend seeing The Love Parade, just because it was hard to find. That's the other challenge I've had with these pre-code movies, is that they've been hard to find. I found a DVD of it that was part of a collection from the Criterion Collection. I will put a link to it in the podcast notes on the blog. But it was a series of Lubitsch musicals, and anyway, I was glad I found it. I'm actually excited to watch some of these other Lubitsch musicals that were in this set when I get some time. The other film that I just want to bring up was the most recent one I watched. It was last week's entry, and it's probably one you all heard of. It's 42nd Street, and 42nd Street was made in 1933, and it's from Warner Brothers, again pre-code. It is more of a dramedy, I guess, to for lack of a better classification. So, but musical, but more emphasis on drama than comedy. It stars Ruby Keeler and Ginger Rogers. But really, Ruby Keeler is the main star of the show. Dick Powell is also in it. But it's one of these, and I think, and it got turned into a Broadway musical. I can't remember when that exactly happened. I've never seen it. I've only seen this film version. This is actually the second time I've seen it. I've seen it before on Turner Classic Movies, and again watching it again as part of the 50 musicals quest this year. But the interesting thing about 42nd Street is that it's considered a musical, but the music numbers do not start until the final third of the film. It's set, it's about a Broadway show that's getting created and getting ready to go on to Broadway, but they're rehearsing and then doing the out of town tryout, like a lot of most Broadway shows do before they open up on the Great Right Way, and so there's a lot of there's singing and dancing and stuff going on, but you're just seeing a rehearsal. And so all the numbers are incomplete, and then you finally get to see the kind of the quote unquote finish number in the final third. The film itself was directed by Lloyd Bacon, but the name to note in this film is Busby Berkeley, and he directed the film's musical numbers. Again, that big chunk in the final third of the film. And you just can't believe these musical numbers. Busby Berkeley is famous for filming these or creating these numbers that have a lot of dancers in them, and he uses a lot of interesting camera angles. Often he films like from the top, so you're looking down on these dancers' heads, and they often form these interesting shapes and almost like a kaleidoscope. So there's a lot of that going on. They're just very elaborate, and they go on, and you almost can't believe what you're seeing because they're just so unique and so interesting. So that was probably the most redeeming thing about 42nd Street. One other thing just to note, and this is not on the list, but also in 1933, Lloyd Bacon, the same director as of 42nd Street, directed a movie called Footlight Parade. And it stars a very young James Cagney, and also Joan Blondell is in it, and Ruby Keeler is back in it too. But no Ginger Rogers, which is a bummer. But it follows this very similar structure in that it's about the creation of musical numbers. I won't go into great detail about the plot in case you want to watch it, but same thing though. The real musical numbers do not start into the final third. They were directed by Busby Berkeley, and you can't believe them. They're just absolutely bonkers. This particular one, they've got these dancers on all these different levels, and then there's a big water portion to it, as in like swimming pool kind of thing, synchronized swimming, and the camera filming above, the water and below the water, and again overhead, and all these different angles, and all this stuff is going on, and all these fountains and all this stuff, and it's really a sight to behold. If I were to compare or have to choose between Footlight Parade and 42nd Street, I'd choose Footlight Parade. 42nd Street, well, it was a lot easier to find. Speaking of HBO Max, Turner Classic Movies has a section on HBO Max, because they're owned by the same parent company, and so there's a lot of classic films that you can just watch on HBO Max. If you're a subscriber, you can check out the Turner Classic Movies section. So that's where I watched it. But anyway, I'll continue with the musical quest. I think it's going to be getting, hopefully, I think it'll continue to still be educational. It's going to be getting into a lot of films that I'm just more familiar with, particularly there's a couple of films starring Fred Astaire and Ginger Rogers that I'm really excited to watch again. And, and then we'll get into like the golden age of the MGM musical from the 40s and the 50s. And that's just going to be, just kind of delight every week for weeks going through the spring and early summer. So I'm excited. I'm excited about that. Well, that does it for this episode of the Movies Past and Present podcast. Again, links and more information about the movies discussed in today's podcast can be found in the podcast notes on my blog at moviespastandpresent.com. Subscribe to the podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, and Stitcher. Links are also on the blog. Please follow me on Twitter and Instagram. I'm at moviespap, as in past and present. As always, I hope you will enjoy some good movies this week, whether they be from the past or the present. Thanks again for listening, and until next time, be safe out there and dedicate yourself to the truth.